May I speak these words in the name of the Creator, the Redeemer, and the Sustainer. Amen. Please be seated. I love those Bible stories about the friends Martha, Mary, Lazarus, and Jesus, such as we've just heard read by Matthew. They really do reveal to us the fully human Jesus interacting with his companions when life was difficult, and very difficult for Lazarus, of course. Well, if times are difficult then, is it a comfort to know that we're all in this together, like those companions? I reckon it has to be a comfort. Times have been difficult for all of us this past week since we heard about Brian's death. And let's face it, this death would always have come far too soon for us. We've lost a dear, dear man. Hundreds upon hundreds of us have gathered here together in this beautiful church that he loved, carving out time in busy diaries, travelling long distances, all to be together to give thanks to God for this extraordinary man and extraordinarily human priest. You know, in later life, Brian was an Apple junkie. iPhones, iPads, Apple TV, he loved them. Loved all gadgets, in fact, even at the end, welcoming his portable oxygen cylinders. Living the dream with his new face furniture, he said. And that was very poignant, of course, as he struggled for his next breath. Well, so many of us have lived out this Apple addiction with him. His frustrated trips to the Apple store, wrestling with his computer, and his postings almost daily on Facebook. We enviously shared with him photos of countless holidays, new bathrooms, new lounge carpets, his pristine garden and produce. Even after death, we shared with him. It is quite unnerving when Brian's name keeps coming up on my iPhone, and when Brian's Facebook account keeps appearing on our iPads. Just wouldn't he have been amused to think he was still haunting us this past week, having died on All Hallows Eve? But of course, the tributes have poured in on his Facebook account, and this is why I mention it. Here's just a few. Sorrowful news, a fine priest and a good friend. I give thanks for Brian's wonderful twinkling humour and the passion and honesty that fueled the twinkle. Farewell to a wonderful man full of good humour, a zest for life, and above all care for his fellow mortals. I'm so very sad for his untimely departure. I still don't believe it, but will be proud to give him a good send-off. Can't imagine not seeing him again. Brian was born in the shadow of York Minster and brought up on a farm with his older brother in the village of Arne, Easingwold. He sang in the church choir in Arne and disastrously came under the influence of a charismatic Irish vicar. These circumstances prompted his father to send him away as a school boarder in order to get this religious nonsense out of his head. However, as luck would have it, his new housemaster turned out to be a committed Christian and a great lover of music. And before long, Brian, in his mid-teens, felt called to ordination. Something of his personality, which we all recognise and love, is perhaps revealed in one of his early school reports, where the teacher suggested that Abell should learn to curb his impetuosity. He studied theology at Nottingham University, where he met his lifelong companion, Noreen, who has been his rock and stability for 53 years of marriage, which began in a caravan whilst he was training for the ordained ministry at Cuddesdon. Such were the comforts of those days. I have to say this to you, Noreen. I remember sitting in a boring church meeting in Thorner with Brian, and you walked past on the path outside the window. He said to me, "There goes my best friend." And you have been that all his life, and you've made such a complementary team. Anyway, after Cuddesdon, Brian came back to his beloved Yorkshire with curiouses at the centre of the universe, Halifax. Lightcliffe, a part of Halifax where Ruth, the apple of his eye, was born, and Mixenden, where Martin, now a definite chip off the old block, arrived. After this, there was lecturing at Lincoln and chaplaincy at Trent College. The Abell family's front door was always open for boys wanting some home comforts. Indeed, as an aside, hasn't that front door been always open to many of us? A real Yorkshire hospitality. Anyway, many of these boys, strangely enough, developed a lifelong addiction to Monty Python as they listened to the vinyl going round and round. So, well, this life of Brian continues with a return to parish life, where he became Vicar of Thorner, Leeds. And Brian always felt that the church had to be at the heart of the community and not separate from it. So the spiritual life at St. Peter's thrived, its music flourished, and Thorner Festival was born. We were all in this together. More parish life followed at St. Chad's, Far Headingley. It was a challenging job, and Brian tackled it headlong, making some lasting changes, and supported by some illustrious priests, including the former Bishop of Durham, David Jenkins, whom he admired greatly. But the pressures of the job took their toll, and he took 3 years out working for the Church of England Children's Society. But not for long, no. He was called in 1989 to become Vicar of Massam. He adored it. The church, once more, at the heart of the community for him, relishing his role as chaplain to the 2 breweries, of course, and loving the twinning programme with Saint-Florent in the Loire Valley. As the millennium approached, new bells were commissioned with a new window to be unveiled at midnight. An honorary canonry at Ripon arrived, Ripon Cathedral, and then a move into retirement in Harrogate in the year 2000. The children had long flown the nest, of course. They were living in Spain, and Brian was really proud of his 2 grandchildren living in Spain, Molly and Harry. And I've been told a number of mischievous stories about you 2 last week. Molly, how your granddad used to quite often say, "Let's sneak off and get an ice cream whilst Gran isn't looking." Is that true? Yes. And then Harry, this amazing story. Teachers in Spain, would you believe, apparently don't go on strike because they'd lose their pay. So they persuade their pupils to go on strike for them. Well, one day Harry wasn't at school for this very reason, and Brian, always sticking up for the underdog, went down with a placard and Harry to the main street to demonstrate on behalf of those teachers. Do you remember that? Yeah. In retirement, of course, ministry never stopped. His farming roots came to the fore and helped to initiate the first North Yorkshire Committee of the Royal Agricultural Benevolent Institution, becoming its chair for 7 years. An impressive amount of money was raised, which was greatly needed during the foot and mouth outbreak. Actually, the RABI has offered Brian a presidency, offered it to him just before he died. El Presidente! And now, in his honour, they want to offer the President's Badge to Noreen. I'm sure that will be received with the honour and pride that it deserves. But that wasn't it. There were countless tasks, like being the clergy retirement officer, helping out constantly at this church, fighting on behalf of 3 Iranian Christians to obtain British citizenship, enjoying his partnership with Leslie Morley as the cooking canon, such fun. Singing in the Harrogate Choral Society, and we have dozens of them here. Going to the opera, down to Opera North, and much, much more. What can I say about this impressive contribution to our lives together? And he reached out to old and young alike. We've got St. Aidan's here, down here, as acolytes. He loved all people of every age. For me and for many of us here, it's the priestly bit that got to me. In fact, reflecting on it, I can't divorce Brian the man from Brian the priest. This was what I admired. He had that ability to be light-hearted and joyful and bubbly, and then take you right down in discussion, debate, or sermon to such a profound intensity that somehow he revealed to you what I believe was no other than the divine truth. I know there are people here who agree with me. In fact, he spoke the truth. He really didn't care for platitudes or pat answers, you all know that. If he was ebullient, he let you know. If he felt depressed, he told you. If he wanted to shout at God, he told you. But he also knew that he came just as he was, to stand a frail human being like the rest of us, before something so much greater than he or we could ever imagine that we call God. And so he saw all of it as pure grace. That's what I admired. He was funny, loving, outrageous, annoying, outspoken, vulnerable, hospitable. In short, he was one of us. And we were all in it together, standing before our Creator. Noreen and all the family, you are surrounded here by people who are concerned for you and who are praying for you. When you lose a dear member of the family, someone we have loved deeply, we are left with a grief that can paralyze us emotionally for a long time. People we love become a part of us. They can shape our thinking, feeling, and acting. Our fathers, our mothers, our husbands, our wives, our lovers, our children, our friends, our companion Brian. They are all living in our hearts. When they die, a part of us dies too. That is what grief is all about. It is that slow and painful departure of someone who has become an intimate part of us. But as we let go of them, they become part of our members, and we remember them. We remember Brian. So he will become a guide on our spiritual journey once more, and he will fill it with hope, Christian hope. So you see, we are all in it together. Brian showed us that. The shops and the TV adverts are getting going now. We're heading towards that great feast of the Incarnation next month. And if that feast can be summed up in a catchphrase, I reckon this does it as well as any other. We, and that includes God as that small defenseless baby, are all in this together. Thank you, Brian, for letting me tell it as it is, and for being so much fun, and for being a companion of the Lord with us, like Martha, Mary, and Lazarus. May you rest in peace and rise in glory, with those trumpets sounding their alleluias loudly on the other side. Amen.